Is it 1610 for you?
Yeah.
Might as well start these. All right. Good evening. This is the DHC working group. If you're in the wrong room, you're welcome to stay. If you're in the right room, please do stay. As with all IETF meetings and working group sessions, please note the note well. The blue sheets are going around. Please make sure you fill that out. If there's anybody willing to be a jabber scribe, we'd love to have you do it, as well as Etherpad note takers would be greatly appreciated to help with the minutes. I am one of the co-chairs, Bernie Volz.
And I'm Tomek Magugalski.
And we have kind of a short agenda this evening. We're doing the administrivia, which should take just a few more minutes. Then we want to talk about the future of the working group and rechartering. And then we'll have talk by Ian on the Yang model, and then two other sessions, presentations by Srinivasa that are on. One is already a working group document. The other is a individual submission at the current time. I do want to point out that there are IPR statements with those last two documents. And Elliot, do you have something about the agenda you'd like to bash?
Yes. Thank you, Bernie. Elliot Lear. I would just ask that we move number 2 to the bottom, if it's okay with others.
Move number 2 to what?
To the bottom. Right. Put that towards the end. I'd like to hear, because I think that will have bearing on the other things will have bearing on that.
Well, I think we'll leave it alone, because it's, we have some strong work items that we still have to do and things like that. So,
okay.
And those things that we are going to discuss today are not the only items we have for the working group.
Okay, just a quick summary of what's happened since the last IETF. There was one RFC published. 2 RFCs are currently in the publication requested queue. One is the DHCP relay port, which will be being reviewed by the IASG later this month on their telechat. And the other is 3315 BIS, with Suresh is working through and hopes to move along in a couple of weeks, I think you said, right? And there are 2 other working group drafts that are currently active, and this was written a little before the Yang model was republished. So there's actually 3, and all of those are on there are only 2. It's the Yang model was already there. I misspoke. So we have those 2 documents, the LW M2M bootstrap options and the Yang model, that are 2 active documents and currently on the agenda. And we have one related draft, which is also on the agenda. Okay.
Okay, so Bernie and I talked with our AD about the future of the working group and our current charter, and we thought that it's now a good time to look at how the working group done in the last couple of years and what's ahead of us. So I thought that first we could start with a quick look at our current charter. So I skipped the preface because the charter is slightly longer, but basically the preface is a text that explains that DHC is about the DHCP protocol, and but the most important part are the items that are here on the slide. So the first item was to develop specific extensions to DHCP-v6 infrastructure, and the charter was very specific. So we listed a number of things that we wanted to achieve. I think there was 9 or 10 of them, and as you can see, they are now color coded. The green ones are done. The red ones are either failed or abandoned. So in the current form, the charter is basically done, at least according to this point. So there are other items, namely the item number 3. It's issue updated versions of the base specifications. This work technically is not done, but it's almost done. So it's now with IESG. So it should be done in the next couple months. So we thought that we definitely need to update the charter. So, and here's the proposed charter. So this is the preamble that's almost exactly copied from the previous one. So there are no changes. If you want to read through it, I can give you a couple of minutes.
I think there's just a small, several small wording changes in here. Like I think the last sentence in the second paragraph is new, and there's a few other little things that I cleaned up. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same as the existing.
Okay, so I see that most people finished reading, so we can move on. And this is the updated part of the core of the charter. So Bernie and I think that the working group should have 4 objectives. The first one is to issue updated version of the DHCP-v6 base specification, and after it's published, we should wait some time, and once there is a significant deployment base, we should work on promoting this RFC to full internet standard. So this is our first goal. The second one is to develop documents that help explain operational considerations for the wider community if and as needed. So sometimes we write documents that explains that explain various aspects of how DHCP should and shouldn't be used. So this is something that that we could write. And item number 3 is to assist other working groups and independent submissions in defining options that follow the option guidelines, and to assure operational considerations are properly documented. So, and so in principle, we don't want to do options work if and this has been true for quite a while now, and we definitely want to continue in that direction. That if there is an option, the option should be designed and standardized in dedicated working group. However, sometimes there are cases when some people coming in and say that, hey, there's no really working group appropriate for this kind of work. And in that case, there should be an exception clause that we talk with our AD, and if we're in agreement that it's okay to adopt this work, it then could be done in DHC.
Ian Farrer. The young work that we've been talking about and trying to reinvigorate, I guess number 2 is where the least worst fit here is, but it's not exactly a good fit for that, because it is an operational document, but it's not explaining an operational consideration. It's standardizing a Yang model for operation and maintenance.
That would fall under additional topics because we've already had that. It's already a working group item, right?
Okay,
so this is forward-looking as to what new things.
So yeah, you're happy to just have 4 as a catch-all for anything that we forgot, kind of thing.
Yeah, and we didn't want to enumerate the things we're currently working on, because that can change. And when things get finished, we have to, so, and we will fix the typo in number 1. There's advanced to full internet standard needs to be fixed. The should be ejected.
Okay.
But, and we'll wordsmith it. I mean, we're willing to take suggestions that people have. If you want to add a number 5 here or renumber them, add something else or whatever. And we, obviously we haven't shown this to Suresh, so he's going to go through it, and the IESG may have comments as well during the whole rechartering process. So we're not ready to send this in yet, and it's been, most of this text has been available for a while on the wiki page that we have for this particular meeting, the IETF 100 meeting, but I'm not sure how many people looked at it, and so we will send this out to the mailing list and get some discussion going and hopefully, wordsmith it and things.
So, I'm just reading the text of 4 again, and that specifically says additional topics and option work with agreement from the responsible area director. We know this work is coming. Does this mean that we need to get agreement for the Yang work with the area director, or, can we say that we already have that? So it's not captured by 4, it should be under 1 to 3.
What is it?
So your point about the additional topics with approval from the area director.
Yeah.
So, isn't this chartering a process that gives us, is basically, we'll go before the area director and we can say, well, this is what we're thinking of doing. We know the Yang work is in there, so shouldn't we enumerate it somewhere else?
So would you prefer to extend the item number 2 to, in a sense, Yang model is an aspect of operational consideration,
yeah,
right?
that seemed like a good fit for me to say that, around, well, because this, explaining operational considerations is not the same as, developing standards around operating and management. And so if it had something like that in there, then I think that would cover it quite nicely.
Let's see if Suresh has a comment on that point.
Yeah, Suresh Krishnan. So a couple of things. So the first thing is like a few years away, right? Like, so 30 to 15 bits just came out. So I would say, like, let's say 5 years in the future, we need to revisit that, right? Like the internet standard thing. And for like 4 itself, it really doesn't need to be said, right? Like, because like, if something is not in the charter, like you usually have to recharter to do it, right? So I would like probably break this down into few things. I'll say like the option definition work, anything that needs to get done needs to like get area director approval and be done with it. So that's just a milestone, and just leave out the other thing, the additional topics for rechartering, just leave it out because that's standard, right? Like, anything that's not in the charter needs to have a recharter. So
yeah, I think, the number 1, we could remove the updated version. It's really the bringing it to full standard that we would, want to do. But
right, like, so the full standard, like, we need to like get a whole bunch of implementations, at least 2 interoperable implementation, and like, some amount of time in the field. So it's like a few years away. So I won't put it like at number 1. So I'll probably put like the other things like, before this, like, and just keep it as an item somewhere. Okay. And so I would say like 2, 3, and 4. And then I don't mind like adding like specifically the operational considerations and I would call it like data models or information models or something. And then that should cover it.
Okay.
Danny Moses. I want to give you some feedback on an experience that I had trying to write a DHCP option. I wrote an option in the DMM working group, and I was advised by Suresh and Sri to come and present it here. I presented it here last IETF, and I got some very good feedback and comments to fix. And from my experience, it'll be very difficult to assume that people can add options to DHCP without coming and getting feedback from a professional working group. So if I understood what you had in the last slide, assuming that people can add options without getting some kind of a feedback or approval from this working group, I'm not sure that will work. What?
So that, I mean, that's really number 3 to assist
That's number 3.
other working groups.
I thought you were planning that in the future.
No, here, like to do work here. This is for this working group, right? So option 3 explains what DHC is going to do for other working groups that are doing DHC options.
Okay, but they will still have to come here and present the option and get
Well,
approval?
I
No,
don't
they
think
review
there's no,
Oh, okay.
they're encouraged to come here. There's no hard requirement. Now, there is another gate that does exist, and that is that when IANA gets the option requests, they actually send email to Ted Lemon, Tomek, and myself as expert reviewers. Okay. And so, that's the way the registry is updated anyway. And so we always will be, involved in sort of policing the options, and we would certainly kick something back if we felt that there was a problem with it.
Okay, that's
Okay. So that's sort of the final gate if a working group or an individual submission doesn't come to us. Okay. All right. So what we'll do, Tomek and I will update the charter text based on some of this, the proposed charter text, and circulate it to the working group for further discussion and edits.
Okay, and I just wanted to briefly mention what are the current items that seems to be having interest of the working group. So obviously we need to wrap up the bees work. There's the relay port that it's also mostly done. We have young models. So currently you see only one of them on our working group page because the V4 is expired, but this doesn't mean that it's dead. It's simply waiting for the V6 to continue, and then the plan is to copy over almost verbatim to V4. We also have 2 drafts with IoT. Both of them are later presented. There's also one topic that Bernie and I are currently working on. This is a mechanism for MAC address assignment that is needed in a couple of environments, in IoT and also in massive virtualization environment when you have a hypervisor that spawns many VMs. Okay, so this is basically what Bernie had said, that the proposed next steps is to update the charter as needed, publish this proposal on the mailing list so other people who are not in the room are also able to think about this and possibly post some comments. Then we will recharter, and with the 3315Bs, we'll just wait until we feel that there is a substantial adoption. Then we will start the procedure to promote it to internal standard. And in the meantime, we will continue other work.
Okay. All right. We'll hand it over to Ian to talk about the Yang model. If you want the
Hello, so I'm Ian Farrer from Deutsche Telekom, talking about the DHCP6 Yang model that we've been working with for a couple of years now. Right. So The draft has been fairly dormant for some time. I think it was nearly a year since the last update, due to, well, basically a lot of the authors moving on to other things and other commitments from the people who are remaining. So we published, after it got adopted as a work group item, we had a couple of updates, fairly small ones in 02 and 03, which were very, very slight changes to namings and various leaf nodes and sorting out a few tiny bugs. We made a request about 4 IETFs ago, I think, for some Yang doctor review and also some implementers reviews, which we did receive, fairly extensive, and there's a lot of good stuff in there, but it was never really acted on until we kind of tried to wake the thing up again in version 04, which is the one that got published just before the cutoff date a few weeks ago. Fully aware that the update was really more of a sort of keep alive to a statement of interest rather than a comprehensive implementation of all of the comments that we've got, but we are starting to work on it again. So a comment from Marcin was around the DUID construction, and going back, and his comment was completely justified. It was nothing like what's in 3315. So that got very much reworked, and I think looks a lot better now. It certainly matches what the capabilities are, or how they're defined in 3315 much better. We had some enable nodes in there as a sort of on-off switch for various bits and pieces. The comment from the Yang doctor review was that there's not really any point in that, so those have gone. And this was a comment from Huawei's review, I think, the reserved address and prefix at the level they sit in the hierarchy of the model. If you've looked at the model, that would make more sense to you. But if you haven't, I strongly recommend you do. Yeah, this is one of the running themes that we've, that we're seeing with this. And when I opened the document up again, it's terrifying in its size. I mean, we're trying to model, the entirety of the protocol really as it stands at the moment, and this is making for a very, very unwieldy model. So, one of the review comments was to divide it into 3 separate modules by the functional element that they're configuring. So, relay, server, client. That will definitely improve things. I think we can go further though, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, the description fields that we have are minimalist, to say the least. It's not a hard job to do. It just takes a long time to go through and update all of the description fields in a way that makes sense without them becoming too verbose. We currently explicitly model every option. I mean, way back, probably nearly 2 years ago, we had this discussion about how do you go about describing options, how do you go about filling those with the relevant content that's going to get distributed to clients in the server model. A comment we got back from a review was if we were to make the option definitions and define those each under the Yang feature statement, then it would make it quite easy for a server implementation to be able to indicate, I support this feature, I don't support this feature with the use of the Yang IF feature function. So I haven't really been through that one in detail, but on the face of it, it certainly sounds like it makes sense. We also incorporated the 7227 generic types, option types on the advice of the work group. They're in there, they could be better, and many, many other small fix-ups that need to be done. So one of the things that when I open this up again to look at it, I mean, it is horrendous. Dividing it into 3 chunks by function makes some sense. I think what would also make sense is to come up with to separate out the option definitions into a separate model and then reference them, because I think that would lead to having a much more readable server model, client model and relay model, and then we just reference and pull in the other options. I also think there's a lot that around the maintainability of the structure that would, when you want to add new options for as they get defined in the future, then we only have to touch one part of it. The main server portion doesn't need to be touched, which may make it a little bit more maintainable. The option definitions that we've got, I did a bit of a compare and contrast against the original RFCs that they come from, and in many cases they're way off. So there needs to be some good diligence going through and actually reading what's in the original draft or original RFCs that these options come from, and modeling them more accurately in Yang. That leads on to whether you've got a singleton or a multi-option. We need to put things into list containers if they're multis and not within lists if they're singleton options. We need to look at how other IETF models are, or which other existing IETF models we have. It may well be that we need to apply these functions to ingress interfaces in the server or whatever. I'm not sure at that stage how that's going to work exactly or if it needs doing, but I think it's worth looking into. I think we need some text in there about extensibility because as it stands at the moment, it's a constantly evolving protocol, and if we have something that goes out of date the minute that it's published, it would be good to write, make it as easy as possible for new option developers to be able to say, and here's the Yang to be able to do this, so that things can be updated, or they can just write that and extend it internally in their own implementations if that's what they want to do. I also am thinking that, given how big this is, it would be useful if we could start an issue tracker to start collating all of the problems that we've come up with. And, that seemed to work quite well with the 3315 work. And given the size of this, I think it would be useful to do that as well. So what's next? Basically, we need some help. That's what it comes down to. We need people to spend some time on this. I think Tomek put something out on the list earlier on today, asking if anyone would step forward. I would say at this stage, even no knowledge or minimal knowledge of Yang may not need to be a barrier if you are keen and enthusiastic.
Hi, I'm the man in the middle. I'm here to help.
Hello.
This is Elliot. First of all, thank you for taking this on. This is interesting work from several different dimensions. First of which is, of course, people want to manage their large-scale DHCP infrastructure mechanisms. And that's what people had in mind, I think, when they first developed this out. I don't know if you weren't an original co-author on this, were you?
I may have come on the second version. I can't
right, so
that, yeah.
I really appreciate you stepping up, and I appreciate the work of the earlier co-authors. First of all, I'm happy to contribute. I'm happy to review on this work, but for a very different purpose, which is I see an opportunity here for us to evolve our thinking along DHCP in the longer term. And in particular, if we can determine how to have a protected communication for stuff that is configure-y stuff, if you'll pardon the use of the term, but not necessarily needed to bring up that first ability to send packets, right? Such that you could separate out just, maybe that little thing you need to get the packets out, like, what's your prefix, what IP address you're using, what's your, maybe what's your next hop router and things like that, depending on, V4, V6, what have you. Mm-hmm. And then there's this other stuff that we have a ton of options for, which is nice to know, like, what's my printer, what's my NTP server, what's this, that, and the other, mm-hmm. right? That you don't necessarily need for that first bring up to send packets, but you might very reasonably want to know. That stuff we may be in a position, given that we've done Yang, right, for all of this, well, then you can serialize it. And if you can serialize it in something like, CBOR or JSON or what have you, mm-hmm. at that point, you can protect it over, CoAP S or something like that. We can begin to think about how we might want to protect this stuff. Now, I don't expect this to be a thing that happens in the next, it's not something that people are going to dump their entire DHCP infrastructure next year. But, 5, 6, 7 years out, you begin to think, well, we can probably think about this architectural separation and see how well we go. So that's why I'm interested in this aspect. So,
you're talking about essentially taking the definitions that are used within the Yang models here and repurposing them for something outside of DHCP.
Well, could be, yes. So, for instance, it could be that we have a DHCP v3, v2, vn, right, which looks an awful lot like a RESTful interface, right, as opposed to,
certainly it's been considered, yeah.
Right. So when we structure the model, this has model structure implications, right, and Now, Suresh is probably going to tell you, Elliot, you've just boiled the ocean here. Thank you so much. But when we don't have to do all the work at once. What we have to start in terms of thinking about this is structuring the data the node definitions such that yes, we want to make sure that we separate out the only absolute necessary things in terms of options from the other things which may not be necessary for the bring up, but are reasonably good choices for initial protection.
So, I mean, in the suggestion I had of saying, well, if we took the options and split them out, then if you were to use them for whatever purpose you had, then that wouldn't preclude you from doing
and
it.
we might want two groups of options, is what I'm saying.
Two groups of options.
Right.
Okay.
Those things that you probably can't protect because you don't have enough. You're not up enough to establish that protection. And this is a thing where we could argue back and forth about individual options, right? But they're mostly the ones that are mandatory, right? In terms of V4 and the things with the M bit set for V6 maybe, right? I hazard a guess as to what where that line exactly is, but we don't have to do that now.
I think. Let me just interject here. I think that you're talking more about the sort of protocol core options versus the other configuration options. And I think, I think, that's an interesting question that I think we have to look at in even this, dividing it out for the work that Ian had specified of separating out the options. It's an interesting question about, I was thinking that we were really just dividing out the other configuration options, and sort of the core protocol things would probably still be in the base spec or something.
Right.
But that was just my mental. And I'm not sure that's the right answer.
This breaks down, I think, to the stateful and the stateless options. Doesn't
Right.
it, in there?
Maybe that's the way to
seems to
say
be
it.
the natural definition, because the stateful options are never going to be part of your option set. These are to do with address
Right.
allocation and prefix and whatever else.
Right.
So.
And I think that would meet your needs, because then those options are already broken out.
We could begin to have that discussion, I think.
Sure.
And so I think that's one. So when it comes to how you divide these two documents, to go back to your previous slide, I think it is. Then in terms of how you divide, whether it's one document or two documents, I do think that is a really good question, and I don't have a really good answer, because it may be that the document is I think a bit of a monster at this point, and I do like that they did all this work. You guys did all this work. It's great stuff, and maybe we can get it all done really quickly. I don't know.
I don't know. With Yang models, and this is not the only one that I'm working on. What I see, the RFC is kind of, it's just a vessel for containing it. What people are interested in is the model itself, and I think there's not much logic in having multiple RFCs to define this. It's the dividing of the modules and those by function. That's what people use, and they need to be self-contained.
Krishnan, so I understand what you're saying, Elliot, right? Like you said, it's probably trying to boil the ocean thing a little bit, but I don't mind if you start thinking about this future stuff. But on the security side, there's a couple of things there. So you talked about something like OSCORE or something like that, right? Something to secure it. But there's a couple of pieces in the DHC security. So one of them is the object security, like you're talking about. There's also the security of the transport, which we need to talk about. And the third thing I think is pretty important for DHC is the trust, right? So we still have to establish the trust towards somebody does it. So I think there's many dimensions, and it makes my head hurt because it's Thursday evening. But I think it's really worth looking at some point, to see if there's something we can do. And also another thing I wanted to point out to you is there's some work going on in int area, with the provisioning domain work, right? And they have some kind of things more like metadata, not really configuration stuff. That's JSON. So you get something and then you pull off a bunch of things in JSON. So maybe for lack of a better term, if I call something if the configuration things are information elements, we can probably map them into multiple encodings to send them out, right? Could be DHCP, could be one of them, and then CBOR would be another one. So I think it's good to keep that in mind when the Yang stuff goes on. But yeah, it's a longer term project. Yeah. Thanks.
It's not that to be solved
And just a question about, the evolution of the model, because I think by putting the options in a separate document, right, that one may evolve quickly, but the base client server relay model kind of stays the same, right? I mean, so that's an advantage. But there's also the question about, would future option definition documents maybe just sort of say, here's the additional part of the Yang model that you need to do it. I mean, that may be a way, so you don't have to, we don't have to rev the option document very often. It's the RFCs that define the new options that sort of add that part of the model.
There's no reason why you couldn't do that. I mean, you can put an augment statement in there, and there's no reason why an equivalent version of 72, 77 for, the Yang that surrounds that
Right.
thing could just say, fill in your field names here, basically. It wouldn't need to be any more complicated than that. So, we can make it so it's just as easy to do as not to do, really.
Right. And then, I mean, we could still republish the core document of the options periodically to suck all those in. So there's one place you can go or whatever.
But I mean, if we can, make it so the maintenance is easy, then
Right.
I think that's got to be.
So I was just going to add this, Elliot, again, that I think that one, as we go forward and we're thinking about the revision model for all of this, then I think that's one where we do want to, I hate to say this because it drives me batty, but we do want to be very careful to consult with the Yang doctors and just make sure that they have a view on this.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So is there anybody that's interested in helping out?
Hey. Brilliant.
So
I have an
we've
email from
got-
someone else as
so
well.
what are
that's
the-
volunteered.
So we got Elliot. We've got Tim. And Tomek. Myself. Did we get everybody? All right. So you've got people to help out. Might be good to have, maybe there's set up a conference call or something for trying to figure out how to divvy up the work and what to do or something. I don't know what the next step.
Well, you've got the names there. Do we have contact details for everyone that's on there? And
No. So
you've
maybe
got
send maybe the thing we should all do that is send Ian
well, there was a
or respond.
request on the list, so just respond to that
Tomek
one.
sent
I
out.
sent the
Yeah,
request,
we'll
just
start-
respond to the list.
Provide your contact information, or email or something, and then we'll get in touch.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, Srinivasa. There's the.
Hey, my name is Srinivas from Ericsson. Okay, this is a draft to propose some options required to enable LWMTM services in IoT scenarios. And this draft is, to set some context, this draft is presented in Prague, IETF 100-DHC-20171116-1810. And it's, of course, after that, it was adapted by the working group. And there's some comments I received from working group, and there's some comments outside working group also. First, the comments, important comments, of course, keeping the editorials aside. One comment from Francis about the certificates that we can encode as part of options. That's, I didn't mention very clearly in the previous versions. So I added a section. Obviously, it's taken from the RFC 7296. The data is taken from that, and that section explains now what type of certificates can be encoded. And there's some comments from Bernie also. Obviously, it's again on the same section because I think I mistyped or I added certificate types wrongly because I picked it from a different document than IANA, which is not correct. And that's also corrected now. And there is some comment on length, which is valid. And in fact, I corrected that one. And of course, there are few editorials. That's what I handled. And apart from these, I have received few comments, mostly needs from Bernie yesterday, which I still need to take care. Probably the next revision, I will take care of them. And in the last meeting, when I presented remotely, there was, working group insisted that this should be reviewed by some IoT expert also, because we here are not experts in LWMTM. So that's why I was trying to find people, and Things to Think RG's research group is the place where I went, and the chair of that, Harry Kernan, assigned 2 reviewers for that, Hannes and Karsten. And of course, I got one generic comment from Hannes about security. And this is something, his question is, how do we prevent that an attacker sets up a DHCP server and points the device to his LWMTM server and take control of that? That's his question. Of course, the question is valid, obviously. But this is not the problem introduced by this option alone, because that's what can happen to any option which we have today in DHCP, like other DNS itself, or maybe NTP, whatever options. So I try to explain a few ways which I know how the problem is solved today. Of course, there's no protocol solving the problem, but the network deployment that is solving the problem. So one is by introducing the snooping function, which is generally used today, making sure that you have a firewall and the DHCP messages are going to only a trusted port towards your DHCP server. And the second thing is having a relay agent or proxy, where the broadcast is converted to unicast, and make sure that your server got that unicast address. So this is what I try to explain, and these are the things which I saw as implementations in different products today. And in spite of that, there is further communication with Hannes. He is probably looking for a solution where a device can protect itself. We are trying to say that you deploy your network such that your device is protected. And there is still some discussion going on, and it's not closed as of now. That's what I wanted to say. I also want to understand if some working group comments on this particular thing.
Now, is this expert review is on like the IoT directorate? Where is this email exchange sort of public, or is it on some?
I have sent an email copying to you both, I think, and on top of that, Ari replied saying that these 2 are assigned. After that, I'm not sure if you people are copied or not.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I'll put that mail chain on the working group now.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be good to try to put some of it there or summarize it, or if it's on, I don't know if there's an IoT DIR, mailing list or something that it could be on or something, just so that there is a good record of it.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. I will now add it to the working group mail chain.
Okay.
This thing. And this needs to be still closed. The next step for this is, as I said, working group opinion on this particular comment. And of course, I have to discuss further with the expert. He did not say no to the document as of now, but he said he'll think about this and get back. I need some time. That's what he's saying. So that's the next steps. Of course, any further reviews, comments, I welcome.
Okay, and you hope to get that discussion closed fairly soon and issue an updated document, or?
I hope it will be soon. I'll be able to get some conclusion on that, and also the comments which you have provided yesterday, mostly editorials, I think.
Yeah, the minor things.
Yeah, I will take care of that and put the next revision.
Okay. I mean, some of the security issues that you talked about are basically where, the 3315 biz document,
yes,
that's also sort of what we concluded about the security model because of, using DHCP-v6 guard and things like that most networks already provide fairly decent security at the lower levels. And therefore, that's one of the reasons we've abandoned the SE DHCP-v6 work stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, regarding the specific comment related to the malicious DHCP servers, I just need to seek some information from working group. Is there any other solution other than what I was mentioning, which came across in any of the discussions? That's one point I want to bring out here, if something is known. As Suresh said, DHCP, it's all about trusting the DHCP server.
Yeah.
So I was trying to explain the same to the expert, but that's where there is some lock. So
Yeah, I mean, I
let's see
guess,
how it goes.
once you download what you get from the URL or whatever, you could, maybe there's some certificate validation or something that can happen there, but yeah, who knows, that.
Okay, fine. I'll further continue discussions and maybe I'll bring it to closure soon. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing, and I forgot to mention that to Ian, Suresh has pinged both Tomek and I to update the milestones on the documents that we currently have. And so, one of the things since both of you guys are authors, is to think about that and send us some stuff. Otherwise, Tomek and I will make up some stuff for you.
Okay. Yeah, that's about this draft. I think it's next also mine.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Okay, this draft is, which is somewhat similar to what we were talking already, but it's different use case and different protocol. I could not think of it when I was submitting the previous one, so I thought I can bring it to the working group. So, okay, the context for this draft, again, it's use cases are IoT use cases, and MQTT, message queuing telemetry transport. This is a protocol which is quite old, but it's regaining popularity in last 5-6 years again because of IoT related scenarios. So there is need for a few options to enable MQTT services on devices in better way. That's what this draft is going to talk about. So just to set the context about MQTT protocol, just one slide. So this is a protocol from Oasis standards body, and it runs on TCP. And this is a publisher and subscriber model protocol where one publisher or multiple publishers publish that data, and there is some intermediate node called broker who replicates it to all the people who are interested or who are subscribed. So this publication of data happens per topics. Topic can be anything. You can just take it as a string, for example, any string. Okay, the topic looks like this. It's generally hierarchical string to understand it better. Hierarchy. It's like the temperature of your home, ground floor, living room. You can just say that in hierarchical way. That's how it looks like. So what is the problem actually here? The problem is, again, it's similar to what we discussed in previous draft, of course. How client can reach to MQTT broker. There's no dynamic way today. It's hard-coded, it's manually configured, and there is a need for dynamically getting that URL of the broker. That's one problem I see. And the second problem is, if you go back to the topics looks like a string, hierarchical string separated by that special character. These topic, there are no guidelines to manage this topic as of now. This is also something like if I want to publish data for a specific topic, the topic is again manually configured at the device, saying that, okay, if you want to publish temperature, use this string as topic for publishing the temperature. This is a manual configuration today, which is error prone, and there is no centralized control for this topic space, which is causing problems in the network. Two different clients, two different publishers publishing data to same topic, which is finally causing a lot of problems, data clash. So I see a need to centralize, have some mechanism to manage this topic space centralized way, and also to dynamically allocate this some part of the topic. Maybe I will call it as a prefix of the topic, which will make sure that the topic is uniquely assigned to every client. So I see need for these options. Of course, I am considering V4 also. As I said earlier, it's not so important. It's more for V6, but I'm considering for V4 also as of now. So these are the four things. Of course, broker URI for both V4 and V6, and topic prefix for V4 and V6. Okay, this is how the options looks like as copied from the draft. Of course, that first line, there is some alignment issue, I think, in the picture. So of course, it's as per the guidelines, options guidelines we have. I think I need not explain. They are just strings. This is for V4. Okay. Yeah, this is, as of now, it's independent submission. So I just wanted to get the sense of the working group and any comments. Does it make sense to adopt? If it makes sense.
Robert Nagy, Deep Dive Networking. Look, I understand the popularity of it coming back. To me, and I'll let other people get up and speak, this certainly falls as not a option itself, but we already have mechanisms for this with vendor defined. So to me, this doesn't tie up an option number on its own, but that's just my thoughts. I mean, we have mechanisms to do this today.
And what those are not using DHCP though, right?
No, still, well, let's take V4. We can definitely put this through in vendor defined
Vendor
option
options,
43,
okay.
and we have ways to do this. All right, I'll expand. Like I was saying, Suresh, we define all these options for things that then get limited use, come in and out of fashion, and then we can't get our option lists updated with type because one person might still be using it. So while it's great today, does this warrant us having this stuck in our list forever, as we know we are? So to me, this should use the mechanisms we have for things that aren't quite full-time.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always a good question, is whether somebody like, if you said, I think you said Oasis is doing this, and, that standards organization may already have an enterprise ID number, and if they don't, they can always get one, and they could do this all under their vendor option space, and it's all within their control. And so, that's a question that I think should always be asked about whether that's a better solution, and we have that both for V4 and V6.
Right. Yeah. So Suresh Krishnan. So that's kind of my point as well. Like, so vendor option, because I'm not sure if there's cross SDO use for this, right? So if there is, maybe that's probably something you can motivate, like in the draft, like cross SDO work, right? Is there somebody outside?
There's no one, because the protocol, as I said, is from someone else. Obviously, just like other draft, we need to go for some review.
Right.
For this also.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. And the second thing is MQTT is not like a IETF protocol too, right? Like, so that's also another thing to consider. So it's going straight against CoAP really. So that's, just think about it. Like it's not like I'm worried about option space getting exhausted, but the question is is it of use, to standardize this in the IETF? That's really something that you can probably look at.
Okay, well, my point of view here is, yes, vendor-specific options, but the question is interoperability. I mean, we can't tag, let's say, one broker to one specific vendor. That's my point of view here.
Well, again, it's sort of like what Cable Labs did. Cable Labs has a whole bunch of options that are done through the vendor options, and it's Cable Labs as a standard organization maintains that directory. It's not to say that IoT vendor X and Y, which are both doing this MQTT. What is it?
Yeah, MQTT.
Yeah. Are we don't want those vendors to do the option. We want Oasis as the standards organization that is responsible for MQTT to get a vendor to use their enterprise ID vendor option space to define these options, okay? And they have a whole, in V4 they have 256 options they can do. Well, they can do any number because they can define whatever they want for the actual data within their enterprise space. But usually we would recommend they be sub-options, and so you've got 256. For V6 you have 65,000, and you can manage, or Oasis can manage that themselves.
Okay, fine.
Okay, that's what Cable Labs did. They have an enterprise ID number. They manage a directory of options for how cable modems are supposed to, and the CMTS are communicating. And so, it's not Cisco's CMTS or Aris CMTS that's using their private vendor space. It's actually the Cable Labs standards organization's vendor space.
Fine. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So vendor specific is not vendor specific. It's really it's very clear. But yeah. So it's 3GPP has done similar things. BBF has done similar things. So it's the SDO that will take the space. So you don't have to worry about one vendor specifically.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
So also a side comment that if other organization like Oasis takes over this vendor space and they have issues with defining new options, I suppose this is not in our proposed charter, but to provide review of the proposed options. But if they show up and ask for a review, we could provide it. So.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else they want to say? Otherwise, thank you. And we'll see. Maybe, we'll be sending out the agenda request fairly soon for London, and we'll see what happens. It's possible we may go dormant if we have no topics for meeting, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll have some good progress on the Yang model to discuss. And yeah, if you haven't signed the blue sheet, please do so. All right, thank you.
That's it. 6 people.
No, we have the other sheet is somewhere. Okay.
I will refresh your memory.
Yeah.
The option was to add a service request for a specific
I gave Ian my info.
with a prefix and service.
So what